This year, the Vikings, whether they plan to or not, are relying on a lot of young players to make that step up. So let's learn about a handful of them. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Luke Braun, and let's find some joy today. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite shows, whether it is a podcast audio listening app or YouTube or Amazon Fire or Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Wherever you listen, if you do listen to this show every single day, I appreciate you so much. My hashtag everydayers, sound off if you can. As I have been mentioning over the course of the week, this is a pre-recorded episode. News breaks lightning fast in the NFL, so I wouldn't even bother telling you this usually, but during training camp, things go very quickly. If there is any news that you are waiting for me to break down, and I'm not doing it today, whatever it is, I'll get to it Monday. But for today, we're going to keep going with the Everyman series. We are almost done with it. We have only a handful of players left, but what we do have is a bunch of players that have, I'll say, an opportunity to ascend, a lot riding on camp, or just guys with a lot of potential that, have more opportunities in front of them than young guys in their position usually do. That's pretty cool. The first of those is Brian Asamoah. Brian Asamoah. I say that wrong, and I'm sorry. I guess we're all saying it wrong for a long time. Brian Asamoah, which there are other Asamoahs that have been in the league that say it that way, so I don't know why. It's the way it's written, in the way that like English dictates it is different. So I'm gonna try to be better about that. But you probably remember the draft video with Brian Asamoah, with Kwesi being so excited to take a fellow Ghanaian, and you gotta kind of understand. Like, to understand the importance of that, you have to understand, like, really where it all comes from. The Asamoahs moved from Ghana to New York City in the year 2000, which was the same year that Brian was born. They were 5 strong at the time, or 6 if you count Brian. I don't know if he was actually born yet or when they moved or not. But either way, he probably wouldn't have remembered much of that. But New York was just a little bit too crowded for the Asamoahs. So they moved into the heartland of the USA and the heartland of American football, Columbus, Ohio. If you want to go inundate your kids in American football, that's one of the biggest cities you can, like one of the best cities for that you can go to. It is Ohio. Now, all of his older brothers will play football growing up, but the Asamoahs in Ghana and before that in New York and stuff were more of a soccer family, maybe a little cricket. Not necessarily so much American football until Ohio, when they all get exposed to it and they all end up playing it. And Brian's brothers, they will all go off to play football at like Bowling Green and West Virginia and Fairmont State. Like, they will all play college football. So there's a lot of going around and seeing college football games, and there's a lot of suddenly exposure to American football. And so naturally, Brian, who's, the 4th youngest or the 4th oldest, is going to fall in love with the sport. He'll play running back and linebacker at high school, and he'll play well enough to get a lot of sniffs from the blue-blooded schools, namely Oklahoma and hometown Ohio State. So as part of making that decision, he'll go to something called the Champions Barbecue, or the Champ U Barbecue. I've seen different names for it. It's an Oklahoma thing. Sooner fans, correct me on what that is. It's an Oklahoma thing that's like a recruitment event, and he'll go to that, and he will meet Tim Kish, who will end up being his position coach at Oklahoma. And they like hit it off right away. And truly, when you look at as many recruiting stories as we have looked at in the last 2 months on this show, isn't that the way it always goes? If you want to predict where someone's going to commit to, look at which coach he got the best relationship with. So that's where they will meet, and he will visit around. That was the first time he actually went to Norman, Oklahoma, saw the campus and all of that stuff, and he falls in love with it. And I think everybody kind of knew he was going to be a Sooner, but the Buckeyes had actually furnished him with a couple of tickets to an Oklahoma versus Ohio State game. He had committed before that game, and Ohio State actually rescinded the tickets, which is very funny. But he will, if he did go see that game, he might have ended up a Sooner anyways, because the Sooners blew out the Buckeyes in that game. But I digress. He will become an Oklahoma Sooner and truly come into his own there as a leader, as a sort of culture driver of the Sooners. He'll break out big time in 2020, and he'll follow up with an even bigger 2021, and then that brings him to the Vikings. If you see him play here, you'll often see he'll wear this headband with the Ghanaian flag on it. And if you look close, you'll see on his knee pads he'll have like an outline of the continent of Africa. Now, there are a lot of people in every NFL organization who are from Africa, or at least whose parents are from Africa, or any country around the world. There are a bunch of Vikings who were not born in the United States. There's a bunch of people in the Vikings organization, not just limited to Brian Asamoah and Kwesi, that are from Ghana. But for Asamoah himself, representing Ghana and Africa as a larger whole is this really important part of his identity. I mean, you can see it in his getup, right? And for him, there is this concept of it's part of his journey, and that your journey is who you are, where you've come from, and what you've gone through is formative. It's who you are. And so this is him kind of displaying who I am. So when he gets a call on draft day from a fellow Ghanaian, you can kind of get why both of these guys are just so damn stoked for it to have worked out this way. It's a very cool moment, and then when you understand more of the context about why it's such a cool moment, it gets even cooler to you. And this too will still speak Twi, I think. I hope I said that right. It's a native language among the Ashanti in Ghana, which is, I think, the biggest population group in Ghana. But they'll just cut it up in another language. They're both fluent in it, and hang out on the field doing that. It's a way to, I think, embrace something fundamentally American about football. And I mean that in the most patriotic sense, in that, America at its inception was meant to be a place where different people of different worlds and different cultures all come to mesh, and you have born and raised Iowans, and corn-fed offensive linemen cutting it up with Brian Asamoah, who has a totally different experience. There is something about an NFL locker room that is sort of a miniaturized version of that melting pot dream idea of America that we always have. And I mean, I think that that's the case with most sports, but it seems like in football, because of the sort of weird half-cooked international presence that it has, where if you are from another country and you want to play football and you want to play it professionally, you kind of do have to go to America, where it just it creates a really cool dynamic that I appreciate. He's also probably the guy on the aux in camp. Apparently that was a big thing for him. He'd have like a big boombox in Oklahoma, and that same boombox is now at TCO, as far as I know. So he's probably the guy on the aux, and like he could probably talk to you about music for hours. But if you look at his world now, he's a starting player, 3rd round, 2nd year starting linebacker. That wasn't really supposed to happen. Or maybe it was. I don't know. Well, maybe that was Kwesi's plan all along, was to cut Kendricks after 1 year and put Brian Asamoah in. But really, that is an opportunity that he earned by being very exciting in his rookie year. Even though he didn't get a lot of opportunities, he truly made the most of them. And now he has way more opportunities that he can go. We can really kind of see what the kid's made of. And so for him, I think this preseason and camp is about preparation more than it is competition. I don't think he's in any kind of serious competition for his job. So it's about getting ready for a season in such a way that's going to give you the consistency and everything that you need to have a starting job and hold a starting job. And if he can do that throughout the next few years, then suddenly we're going to be talking contract extension. Ain't that the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? There are a couple of rookies now that I want to talk to you about that are going through a much harder road to get here, one way or another, who have gone through a much harder road to get here. Before I do that, however, it's fantasy time. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy football picks each week. While we're in preseason, we're talking about kind of fantasy draft stuff, but in the season, we'll do waiver wires and all of that. And today we're talking about being on the turn. If you pick last, but then you pick first in round one, how about Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb? Look, going 0 RB is like the trendy thing to do, but if enough of your people do that and you can get Jonathan Taylor, who is falling pretty far in redraft right now, and somebody like Nick Chubb, who is also, I think, probably pretty good value, then you can just have that position squared away and the rest of your draft can be dedicated to the other positions. And it gives you a sick 1-2 punch that you can always rely on. These guys are number one running backs. They aren't having their workloads cut into too bad by anybody. Can't go wrong. And that sort of consistency gives you a much easier time finding a better fit with your team. And ain't that what it's all about? At eBay Motors, eBay's guaranteed fit, they know that building a championship team is about getting a perfect fit. And it's the same with your vehicle. So with eBay Guaranteed Fit, there's over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle that are right at your fingertips. You can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly no matter what it needs, from air filters to batteries to alternators to shocks, whatever it is, you can find it with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit. So relax, have that peace of mind. eBay Motors will carry you through the entire process of what is this part? What do I need? Is it going to fit my car? Am I buying the right thing or am I wasting my money? eBay Motors has you covered on all of that. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for that green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. When Andre Carter was sort of the talk of the draft process around combine time, there was this stat that went around that is unfortunately still true. Nobody from Army has been drafted since 1947. Everybody thought Andre Carter would get drafted. His draft stock fell. We'll get into why, but that is still true. Nobody from Army has been drafted since 1947. There's a reason for that is at the very least interesting to ponder. But we've got to get through the rest of the story to get there. And the way that Andre Carter ended up at Army instead of some other school is interesting in and of itself. He grew up a very soft-spoken, quiet kid. He was kind of very go with the flow. Yeah, I'll eat whatever's for dinner. I'll do whatever we're doing today. You didn't really hear a lot of complaining out of him. Rare for a kid that age. Until it was time to go out for football. It was like the only time his mom remembers that he ever asserted himself as a kid. And, how could you say no when a kid that is that sweet and, that good of a listener and all that is going to come up to you and say, hey, Mom, I want to play football. I need to play football. Like, oh yeah, you're definitely playing football. Okay. Yes, absolutely. Right. That also meant that fascination with football meant that Sundays were for the Chicago Bears. His dad's from Chicago, so he is a diehard Bears fan, which makes ending up in Minnesota very funny. He was asked at the Combine in an interview with Mike Florio, like, who do you want to sack? He was like, Aaron Rodgers, which is also very funny. Because, probably not going to play him unless he ends up on a different team, which he totally could. Anyways, he would sit on the couch and watch the Chicago Bears with his dad. But these were the Bears, the late 2000s, early 2010s. Especially the formative years were pre Jay Cutler. So we were talking the Kyle Orton, that one Rex Grossman Super Bowl year, Chad Hutchinson, watching these absolutely brain dead offenses, totally anemic offenses in those years for the Bears. And watching them be like primarily a defensive team. They were the team of Brian Urlacher, not the team of Kyle Orton. And it made him really, really fall in love with defense. But when he got to high school, he grew up tall and lean. So you're going to play tight end, buddy. And a little bit of receiver too. He needed to put on weight to like truly be a tight end. And there was a 4-star kid at tight end that was like going to start anyways. So not only are you undersized, but you're up against this kid that you're never going to start over. So he didn't really get the run that he needed to get to really get in front of scouts and get recruited. His senior year, he transferred out of that situation to try to get a little bit more. And he did get more snaps, and he kind of got out in front and said, hey, look what I can do. But nobody was looking because all the recruiters by then had their eyes elsewhere. So it was kind of time to get creative, and high school football eligibility rules for him allowed him to play another year if he went to prep school, Cheshire Academy, a boarding school in Connecticut. So he went to his 5th year of high school. This is not a college, this is a prep school. But by that point, he was 6'5", I want to say like 220. And he meets the coach, and the coach is like, you're on defense. You're an edge rusher. Like, he just walks up, and the dude's just like got edge rusher, like rolling off of him. So he goes to edge rusher, sure enough. And he picked things up quick, and he made use of all of that length. So when he was playing there and excelling the way he was, that coach calls up a buddy at West Point and says, hey, I think I got one for you. The thing about Army, as unorthodox of a path as Andre Carter took to get to the college ranks, Army kind of lives for that thing. That the guys with weird paths, or the guys that sort of fall through the cracks for whatever reason. Because if you're a good player, if you're a 4-star recruit in the United States, you are not going to Army. You're going to Bama, you're going to Ohio State, you're going to Oklahoma, right? You're Brian Asamoah, you're not going to Army. Unless you want the military service, right? So it's sort of a perfect fit. Hey, you've had this weird path. Other schools aren't going to look at you. Other schools aren't looking at you, so we can get you. And you look like a total freak, so we're going to get into it. It was absolutely perfect. But hey, there's kind of a reason that these kids won't go to Army. At Army, there's 2 reasons. One, when Andre Carter was recruiting, the rules hadn't changed yet. So you needed to go to military service after college. I don't care about the NFL. You're going to military service, which made it really hard to kind of dream about being a professional football player if you got your military service that's going to, cut you off after your pro career, or after your college career ends, in between that and your pro career. The second thing is, because of military training and being part of the Army or Navy, Marines, or whatever, it's almost like being in another sport, but you can't design that sport to be helpful. If you're a wide receiver and you're in track, that's a great other sport to be in, right? Or if you're a wrestler and an offensive lineman. But being in the Army, it's like a lot of cardio. So your football season, you'd bulk up and you'd go be in football, play in shape. And then when you're not doing the bulk program of college football, you kind of lose all that weight because you're doing a bunch of cardio for your Army stuff, and that's your workout. So taking care of his body and yo-yoing up and down became this really, really difficult thing. After Army, when Andre Carter's in the draft process, he'll go to the Senior Bowl. And it's at the Senior Bowl where I think things really come off the wheels for him. Where it's just a bad weekend, right? He just gets beat a lot. No two ways about it. And that, coupled with poor combine results, will drop him all the way out of the draft. So still, since 1947, nobody from Army has been drafted, as sure as it looked at that moment for Andre Carter. If you listen to the interviews and read the articles, people are like, you're going to be the one. They just knew, right? He was getting mocked in the second round. Of course, he's not going to fall out of the draft, but the pre-draft process can do that when it goes poorly. But to realize why that went so poorly, you kind of have to understand that there was this weird yo-yoing athleticism thing, and getting his body right was so much more difficult at Army than it is for somebody not only at Ohio State, but somebody at Fordham or any other school where you could just play football and get your body in just football shape, and that's fine. He's also a slender player to begin with. So all of that turns Andre Carter into this, hey, is your body, are you going to be able to get, like, what do you look like when you're only focused on football? And he's really, really excited to show the world what that is, what the answer to that question is. But I think because that's such an unknown question, he doesn't get drafted, and now he has to prove it. But he's in a precarious spot right now. He's on the physically unable to perform list with a soft tissue injury. And if he does manage to fight his way back, make the team, carve out an NFL career, know that at this particular moment, he has fought through a lot and he will have to fight through more. And if we do live in the reality where that is true, it's going to be a really good story to watch. Somebody else who fought through quite a bit to get to this point is DeWayne McBride, 7th round draft pick, and I think the only running back I haven't done yet. So we'll get into him next. I spend a lot of time asking about what sports means. This is a lot of times I'll get the question, why do we do this? Why do we watch the Vikings? Blah, 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 especially after a loss, And it always prompts me to think, yeah, good question. What are we doing this for? I mean, this is just what's on TV, right? Like, what's preventing us from flipping the channel and watching something that doesn't make us furious? And to a much more extreme version of that, when you are an athlete and you're getting up at 5 a.m. and you're taking all the punishment, and you're sore every single day and you're bruised every single day, and you're throwing up on hot days, all of the stuff that athletes tend to go through. If you go through all that, why? What, like, join math club. Like, you don't need that to be your after school activity, What is it about sports that is so enrapturing to make a kid like Andre Carter, if that be the only thing that he actually really truly wants to do? Or like with the Asamoahs, all 4 boys go into football. Like, what is it about sports that make that happen? I think about that kind of thing a lot. For DeWayne McBride, the answer to that question is that it is an escape from all sorts of hardships. He has questions constantly when he's a kid. Where am I living right now? Where am I going to be able to live next month? Am I going to he had to change schools a whole bunch. He didn't have a lot growing up. That's the way he'll put it. I guess that's the way I'll put it too. Part of that is that his father has 20 children, including DeWayne and his 5 full sisters. And for him, there's a lesson to be learned there, since his dad had offers playing football coming out of high school. And the reason he wears number 32, by the way, is that's what his dad wore. His dad had offers, but had kids by then. And so couldn't really dedicate himself the way he had to pursue those opportunities. And so for DeWayne McBride, or Debo as he goes by, he's very determined to not do that. As he's talking, he did an interview at UAB about this story, and he's like, hey, I don't have kids yet. That's a lesson that I got to learn. Like, that's one thing at least that he could do. But it's a lot harder than that for him to play well, to get a scholarship and all of that, because he watched a lot of his friends stray off of the straight and narrow too. He grew up in, I think Fleming Island is the name of it, Florida, and then later he moved to another part of rural Florida. And as he put it, he's one of the only people in his whole life that he ever knew to, quote, make it out of rural Florida. And he got a bunch of scholarship offers, like 20 scholarship offers. His dad always told him, never let anyone tackle you. That's the lesson, is nobody, not one person gets to tackle you. That's got to be the mentality, right? And it sounds like a no-brainer, but when you're a kid and you're learning football, that becoming ingrained in you is going to turn you into a different kind of back than the kind of back that takes their 3 yards in a cloud of dust. This is someone that has that never give up mentality. And I think that there is something too when football is that escape hatch where you can just go out there and play and nobody ever gets to bring you down and you have the full control of it. I'm speculating a little bit there, but to me that sounds like something that be a pretty helpful coping mechanism when things are a little bit rough. He took that to heart and it turned him into the player that he is. He'll end up choosing UAB based on the relationships and that he forms during the recruiting process. And the second he steps on campus and his family turns around, he's in the rear view mirror, the car's driving away, he gets a chill down his spine. Because for the first time in his life, he's not going to be by family. He's a couple states over. He has to, be on his own and be an adult. For anybody who did go to college, they can kind of relate to that moment where you're like, whoa, I'm just like me now. I'm not like, Debo Jr. I'm me. I'm Dwayne McBride. Going to UAB, getting the football scholarship, he will pretty quickly break out as a total superstar, and it's very clear that he's able to kind of dominate that level of competition. There are a couple of anecdotes from that time that I want to tell you. There's one that just shows exactly how motivated he is. He is truly somebody who will never give up. And again, I think when football is your escape hatch, if you give up, you lose that escape hatch. It's a great way to generate someone with absolutely no quit in them, because quitting is not an option in some of those situations. When he was, so UAB had a great season in, I think it was 2021, and they were going to the Conference USA Championship, but DeWayne McBride will test positive for COVID. He'll have to quarantine for 2 weeks. Over those 2 weeks, you can't be with the team, you can't practice, you can't go to the facility and work out. So they'll go to the Conference USA Championship, and he's going to be cleared to play the day before that game. And so the night before that game, they hear outside of their hotel rooms. And then another one. And then they all pop their heads out of the door, and they see DeWayne McBride sprinting up and down the hall of the hotel room, trying to get back into playing shape, get a little cardio in so he can go play in that Conference USA Championship. Now, here's the thing. We live in the transfer portal era, and you better believe he got calls to go up to maybe play for bigger schools, but he said no. He is a Blazer for life. There is this inner loyalty to him that he just really, really loved UAB. And that decision might have tanked his draft stock. He might have gone a little bit higher if he could have spent one more year against better competition. One of the main knocks on him is, but can you do it outside of Conference USA? If you want an answer to that, go watch his 2021 game against Georgia, where guys were living in the backfield, but he was like juking Jalen Carter. It was pretty sick. But he will return to UAB for one more year, 2022. That is, he'll rack up like 1,700 yards. But we all know that when you're at UAB, when you're in Conference USA, you might just not get drafted because it's a small school, because it just doesn't have the pedigree. And so he was prepared for that. And he actually, his coach, his UAB coach, was like ready to sit him down and have like the talk about, okay, here's how you do undrafted free agency. Hey, this is an opportunity still, prove them wrong, motivate yourself, whatever you need. But then near the end of the 7th round, the Vikings call his name and he'll come be a Viking. And again, much like with Andre Carter and Asamoah, a good camp here can really pay a lot of dividends for Asamoah. Good camp, prepare him, go have a good starting year. I mean, there's a whole contract extension on the line in the long term. For Andre Carter, if he can make the team, and that is an open thing. Hey, DJ Wanham, Pat Jones, these guys aren't. Daniil Hunter might not even be in the building. There's open spots. Or vulnerable spots, I guess I would call them. If you go have the camp of your life, maybe you can go do it. And that's where Andre Carter's head has to be as soon as he's healthy. And for McBride, it's the same thing. Hey, if I can go blow this out, they kept 4 running backs and a fullback last year, so we know that they're willing to do that. And even if they aren't, maybe I'll just go outplay one of those other guys. That's, they're all day 3 draft picks too. So let's get out there and do this. And DeWayne McBride is someone that will play harder than you. He will play longer than you, and he will never quit. That's an okay formula in the NFL. And with that, no matter what your situation, you got a puncher's chance. Again, I apologize if there is anything that I missed that happened on Thursday. I've been on a plane, so I wasn't going to be able to get a podcast done, so I got something out for you instead. Whatever it is, just if Justin Jefferson got extended and I missed it, We'll get there on Monday. It'll all be all right. I will see you all for that, and then camp starts. Very, very excited. Or at least I get to camp. Camp has, of course, already started. Very excited. I get to actually go watch him clash pads. Very cool. I'll see y'all for that. And as always, Skull.